The tension was palpable from the moment Denzel Washington walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel live stage. What should have been a routine promotional appearance for his latest directorial project quickly devolved into one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. Kimmel opened with his typical monologue, but eagle-eyed viewers noticed something different in his demeanor when he introduced Washington. There was an edge to his voice, a smirk that seemed more calculated than comedic. The audience applauded enthusiastically as Washington took his seat, flashing his trademark smile and adjusting his suit jacket with the grace of a man who had done this dance 1,000 times before. "Denzel, great to have you back," Kimmel began, his tone deceptively warm. "I have to ask, with all the talk about method acting these days, especially after some recent controversies in Hollywood, do you think actors sometimes take things too far?" Washington's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Those who knew him well could see the slight tightening around his eyes, the way his shoulders straightened just a fraction. "Method acting is about truth, Jimmy. It's about finding the authentic emotion in a character, but there's always a line between commitment and recklessness." Kimmel leaned forward, his smile widening in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "But come on, we've all heard stories about actors staying in character between takes, demanding special treatment, making life difficult for crew members. Surely you've seen some of that behavior yourself." The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Washington's jaw tightened slightly and he took a measured breath before responding. "I've been in this industry for over 4 decades, Jimmy. I've worked with consummate professionals, and I've worked with people who, let's say they confuse dedication with self-indulgence." "That's interesting," Kimmel pressed, his voice taking on a more pointed tone. "Because there have been some whispers recently about certain A-list actors who shall remain nameless, creating hostile work environments under the guise of staying in character. Some might say it's just another form of workplace harassment." The studio audience grew quiet, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Washington's composure remained intact, but there was steel in his voice when he replied, "If you have something specific to say, Jimmy, I'd appreciate if you said it directly rather than dancing around innuendo." Kimmel chuckled, but it was a hollow sound. "Oh, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just saying that sometimes when people get too comfortable with power, they forget that everyone else on set is just trying to do their job too. You know how it is." Washington set his water glass down with deliberate precision. "Actually, I don't know how it is because I've never conducted myself that way. But it sounds like you might have some personal experiences you'd like to share with the audience." The host's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "Well, we all have our stories, don't we? I mean, I've heard things about pretty much everyone in this town. That's just how Hollywood works." "That's how gossip works," Washington corrected, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable warning. "And there's a difference between being a comedian and being a tabloid." Kimmel's laugh was sharp now, edged with something that sounded almost vindictive. "Look, I'm just saying that maybe it's time for some of these veteran actors to acknowledge that times have changed, that maybe some of the old-school methods aren't appropriate anymore." Washington leaned back in his chair, studying Kimmel with the intensity of a man accustomed to reading between the lines. "Are you suggesting that experience and dedication are somehow problematic?" "I'm suggesting that hiding behind craft and method can sometimes be an excuse for bad behavior," Kimmel shot back, his pretense of casual conversation dropping entirely. "And maybe some people who've been coasting on their reputation for years need to be held accountable." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the usually restless studio audience seemed to hold its collective breath. Washington's eyes never left Kimmel's face, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of barely contained fury. "Jimmy, let me be very clear about something," Washington said, each word measured and deliberate. "I've spent my entire career treating every person on every set with the same respect I'd want for my own family. So if you're insinuating otherwise, you better have facts to back that up. Kimmel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but his combative stance didn't waver. I'm not insinuating anything about you specifically, Denzel, but let's be honest. The industry protects its golden boys, doesn't it? How many stories get buried because someone's too powerful to touch? The accusation hung heavy in the air. Washington's publicist, visible in the wings, looked ready to intervene, but Washington raised a subtle hand, keeping his eyes locked on Kimmel. You know what I think is interesting, Jimmy? You're sitting here talking about accountability and power, but what about your own track record? What about the stories that don't make it to air? Kimmel's composure cracked slightly. What's that supposed to mean? It means maybe before you start throwing stones, you should check your own glass house. Washington's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. I've heard things too, Jimmy, about how you treat your writers, your staff, people who can't fight back. The host's face flushed red. That's completely different. Comedy is collaborative. Sometimes things get heated in the writer's room. That's creative tension. Creative tension, Washington repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. Is that what you call making junior writers work 18-hour days while you take credit for their best material? Is that what you call screaming at production assistants when the coffee isn't hot enough? The audience stirred uneasily. Several crew members exchanged glances, and the camera operators seemed unsure whether to keep rolling. Kimmel's hands clenched into fists on his desk. You don't know what you're talking about, Kimmel snapped, his professional facade completely abandoned now. I've built this show from nothing. I've given opportunities to dozens of people. Just because I have standards doesn't make me a tyrant. Washington leaned forward slightly, his presence commanding despite his quiet tone. Standards? Is that what you call publicly humiliating guests who don't laugh at your jokes? Making people feel small so you can feel big? That's rich coming. From someone who's never had to work a day in his life for anything, Kimmel shot back, his voice rising. You've been handed everything on a silver platter since day one. Some of us had to claw our way up. The accusation was so patently false, so divorced from Washington's well-documented journey from working-class beginnings to Hollywood royalty, that it seemed to stun everyone in the studio. Washington sat back, genuinely taken aback by the sheer audacity of the statement. Handed everything? Washington's voice was incredulous. Jimmy, do you know where I came from? Do you know what I had to overcome to get here? Spare me the rags to riches story, Kimmel interrupted, waving dismissively. Everyone in Hollywood has one. The point is, once you made it, you forgot what it was like for the rest of us. Washington's eyes flashed dangerously. The rest of us? Jimmy, you're the host of a network television show. You make millions of dollars a year. What exactly are you struggling with? I'm struggling with entitled actors who think they can walk into my studio and lecture me about how to do my job, Kimmel exploded, finally dropping all pretense. You come in here promoting your little passion project, expecting me to kiss your ring like everyone else in this town. The studio fell into shocked silence. Even Kimmel seemed to realize he'd crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. Yeah, that's right. I said it. I'm tired of pretending that just because someone's been around forever, they deserve automatic respect. Washington stood slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. When he reached his full height, he seemed to tower over the seated host, despite the desk between them. Respect isn't automatic, Jimmy. It's earned. And right now, you're showing everyone exactly why you haven't earned it. Kimmel jumped to his feet, his chair rolling backward with such force it nearly toppled over. Don't you dare stand there and lecture me in my own studio. I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't need some washed-up actor telling me how to run my show. The insult hit the air like a physical blow. Several audience members gasped audibly, and crew members looked around nervously, unsure whether to intervene. Washington's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. a coiling of energy that suggested a man pushed beyond his considerable patience. Washed up? Washington's voice was deadly quiet. Jimmy, I was winning awards when you were still doing prank calls on radio. I've directed films that will be studied long after your show is canceled and forgotten. But more importantly, I've never once had to tear someone else down to build myself up. Kimmel's face was now beet red, sweat beading on his forehead under the studio lights. Oh, please, spare me the moral superiority. You Hollywood elites are all the same. You preach about integrity while you live in your ivory towers, completely disconnected from real people. Real people? Washington's eyebrows raised slightly. Jimmy, my foundation has built schools, funded scholarships, and helped thousands of young people from backgrounds just like mine. What exactly have you done for real people besides mock them on television? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Kimmel opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, his usual quick wit apparently abandoning him. The silence stretched uncomfortably before he finally sputtered, That's not the point. The point is you can't just come in here and act like you're better than everyone." "I don't act like I'm better than everyone," Washington replied, his voice gaining strength, "but I sure as hell know I'm better than this." He gestured broadly at the studio, at Kimmel, at the entire toxic atmosphere that had been created. This petty, small-minded attempt to humiliate a guest for your own entertainment. Kimmel's producer could be seen frantically gesturing from the wings, apparently trying to signal for a commercial break, but Kimmel was too far gone to notice. "You know what? Maybe you should leave then. Maybe you're too good for my little show." Washington nodded, slowly, as if Kimmel had finally said something sensible. "You're absolutely right. I am too good for this." He began removing his microphone with deliberate care, his movements unhurried despite the chaos around him. "But more importantly, your audience deserves better than this. Your staff deserves better than this. Don't you walk away from me," Kimmel shouted, his voice cracking with desperation and rage. "We're not done here." Washington paused in removing his mic pack, fixing Kimmel with a look that could have frozen fire. "Oh, we're done, Jimmy. We've been done for a while now. You just didn't have the sense to realize it." He handed the microphone to a stunned production assistant with a gentle, "Thank you," then turned back to face Kimmel one final time. "You know what the real tragedy is here? You had a platform. You had influence. You could have used it to lift people up, to bring some joy into the world, to make a positive difference. Instead, you chose to use it to tear people down and feed your own ego." Kimmel stood behind his desk, breathing heavily, looking suddenly small and deflated despite his earlier bluster. "Get out," he said weakly. "Just get out." "Gladly," Washington replied. He turned to address the stunned studio audience directly, his voice carrying the authority of decades of commanding stages and screens. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you had to witness this. You came here expecting entertainment, and instead you got a display of everything that's wrong with this industry." With that, he walked toward the exit with the same dignified bearing he'd maintained throughout the confrontation. The audience sat in stunned silence, many looking embarrassed to have witnessed such a public meltdown. As Washington reached the edge of the stage, scattered applause began to break out from various sections of the audience, growing louder as more people joined in. Kimmel stood alone behind his desk, the sound of genuine respect for his departing guest washing over him, like a rebuke. His hands shook slightly as he reached for his water glass, the reality of what had just transpired beginning to sink in. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of his humiliation for posterity. Washington paused at the studio exit, turning back one final time. "Jimmy," he called out, his voice carrying clearly across the silent studio, "when you're ready to have a real conversation about respect and accountability, you know where to find me. But next time, leave the cameras off." And with that, one of Hollywood's most respected figures, walked out of Jimmy Kimmel Live, leaving behind a host whose reputation would never fully recover from the night he tried to tear down a legend and discovered he wasn't nearly as untouchable as he thought.